Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Keith Pascal, UCMDB Worldwide Support Lead. Today we're going to take the first step of 3 into the Excel integration. In this video, we'll cover the setup and the first use case. The supported setup is an Excel spreadsheet of version Microsoft Excel 97, 2000, 2003 format. That is a .xls file, or the Excel 2007 and beyond format, which is a .xlsx file. In addition, the data flow probe needs to have read permission to wherever it is that the file is at on the data flow probe. Also, the data flow probe needs to be running and connected to UCMDB. So let's look at a simple use case. We'll call it use case 1. In this case, I want to import a node with its IP addresses and interfaces. The picture below is a good example of the resulting topology that we need to have. But we need to follow some specific rules for this import to work. Let's go over some of those rules for how to set up the Excel file itself. First of all, you can only use supported file types that are Excel, right? So if you're in Microsoft Excel, do a file save as and save it as an Excel spreadsheet. The CI types are on their own tabs in the spreadsheet itself, and the CI type tab must be named exactly as it is in CI type manager, not the display label. For example, the IP address in CI type manager below is IP address with no space in between it in camel case, so a capital I and a capital A. That is its display name. But that is not what you would use in the Excel spreadsheet. You would use the name of the CI type, which is IP_address. Likewise, for attributes that we're going to use in our Excel spreadsheet, we need to define the actual name of the attribute, which is not the same as the display label. So, for example, we want to put a name and a note in for that IP address. The display name for that is name and note. The actual name is name and data_note. So you would need to use the actual name of the attribute, data_note, not note. Now, in addition, there are enumerated attributes. And for enumerated attributes, you must use the exact value specified in the enumeration. To get to the enumerations, you can, in modeling, click on CI types and then system type manager to then show the actual enumerations that you're interested in. For example, the interface index _status _enumeration is a list of case sensitive attributes, and that needs to be specified exactly. For example, down with a capital D would not match down all lowercase. We also need to make sure that relationships are valid. This is something that the Excel spreadsheet importer will check when you actually run the import. So to find that, in this case, I selected node, and then I control-clicked on IP address, and then right-clicked and add remove relationship. That'll bring up a window that shows what valid relationships there are between IP address and node, and between node and IP addresses. You can see in the example below that containment is a valid link from node to IP address, but IP address to node is not valid. As a side note, we want to make sure that the relationships that we define in an Excel spreadsheet match actual data that might come in from, say, discovery. The reason we want to do this is because if we're importing a list of nodes and then later those nodes become discoverable, we want them to be able to merge with the imported CIs from the Excel spreadsheet. Relationships go on a separate tab, and that tab is called Relationships. All relationships consist of 3 different columns: Start, relation underscore type, and end in that exact format. All the values in start and end must be formulas. That is, they point to another cell in the appropriate spreadsheet. Do not type text in here. The formulas are in the form of equals node exclamation point A2. That means go to the node tab and look at cell A2, that is column A, row 2, to get that value. That is what is going to be displayed in the start or end column. Now that's important because if we put text in there, you will get some errors, and you'll see that in the error and troubleshooting messages. Now there is a special relationship type, and that is a relationship of composition. That is not in the relationships tab. Instead, it's stored in a value called root underscore container, and that's of the attribute of the CI type being inserted. For example, for an interface, the root container is a link to the node that contains it, and so that is also a formula. A very important part of this is to ensure that UCMDB has enough reconciliation data to insert this CI. You can look in UCMDB in the identification rule, or you can examine the key attributes that that CI type uses. The stuff that's in the identification criteria is a minimum amount of data that needs to exist for the CI to be inserted. So, for example, this is an interface. The minimum amount of data required for that CI to be inserted would be an attribute called Cloud Resource Identifier, or root container plus MAC address, or root container plus interface name. Now, in addition, a lot of CIs will contain additional information that is also used for reconciliation in the verification and validation sections. The verification section is the part of the reconciliation rule that will determine if two CIs can be merged or not. So for example, if I have an interface with a root container and an interface name, and those two interfaces also have two interface types, and those interface types are different, then those will be two separate CIs. In the case where I add two interfaces with the same root container and the same interface name with no other information, those CIs will be merged. The file setup itself, the column headers match the UCMDB attributes for that CI type. You'll note that the node listed below in the tab is the same as the name of the CI type that you're inserting. In this case, I'm inserting node. It could just as easily be NT if it was a Windows system, or Unix if it was a Unix system. I'm adding attributes based on name, data underscore note, serial underscore number, and description. And my values all match those types. A sample IP address, for example, is name routing underscore domain, which in UCMDB, the display label of that is UCMDB routing domain, but routing underscore domain and authoritative underscore DNS underscore name. Now, for an IP address, you have things that have default values. If you want to use the default value, you do not have to specify it in the spreadsheet itself. So default domain is the default routing domain for my system. I could omit that column and it would still get the routing domain of default domain because the manipulator on the front end of the data in pipe will add that. Here's an example of an interface. I have a MAC address, and then the root underscore container of that MAC address is a reference to the node sheet, column A, row 2. So that is a reference to the node that I created in the node tab. And here is an example of a relationship sheet. There is a start, a relation underscore type, and an end. In the start, we have equals node exclamation point A2, referring to cell A2 of the node tab. The relationship type is containment. The end is IP underscore address exclamation point A2, that being a reference to the IP underscore address tab, cell A2. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to seeing you next time when we'll examine a more in-depth use case.